Margaret Whitmore thought she was just running a quiet errand until a small girl with floor-dusted cheeks tugged her sleeve and murmured, "I only need milk for Grandma's medicine." In that instant, the billionaire widow realized her cart carried more than groceries. It carried the chance to rewrite two lonely lives. But what happens when generosity uncovers a secret that could shatter them both? Golden morning light poured through the supermarket skylights, tinting every shelf with a gentle glow. Margaret Whitmore guided her wicker-handled cart down aisle 3, the wheels clicking against spotless tiles. At 72, the silver-haired widow moved with composed grace, her navy shawl draped over a cashmere blouse that still smelled faintly of lavender sachets. A lifetime of privilege meant this weekly errand was less necessity, more ritual, one small way to feel ordinary again. She paused by the baking goods, eyes lingering on sacks of bread flour. Herbert had loved homemade rice. She could almost hear his laugh echo off the metal rafters. A soft ache tugged at her heart, but she breathed it away and reached for almond biscotti instead. Her estate chef baked more than she could ever eat, yet aisle 3 reminded her that choosing one's own cookies still mattered. Across the shelf, the bright orange sale tag for milk caught her eye. "Buy one, get one." Instinctively, she placed 2 gallons into her cart, though she no longer drank much milk. Habit, she told herself, or maybe memory. Just then, a burst of children's laughter drifted from the next aisle, followed by the rhythmic squeak of sneakers. Margaret smiled. Grandchildren were a blessing she'd never received, and the sound always pinched. She nudged her cart forward, turning the corner toward canned soups. When sunlight from the front windows flashed against a small, floor-smudged face standing alone near the end-app display. The girl couldn't have been more than 9, her cheeks dusted white like fresh snow on rosy apples. Clutched in her hands was a wicker basket filled with neatly wrapped bread rolls. She wasn't browsing, she was waiting, scanning each shopper with quiet hope. Before Margaret could decide whether to greet her, the girl's gaze locked onto the twin gallons of milk in Margaret's art, and something in those wide brown eyes made the widow's heartbeat quicken. Margaret stepped closer, her loaf-shaped purse swinging gently at her side. The girl's basket wobbled between small elbows as she gathered courage. "Morning, ma'am," she began, voice barely above the hum of refrigerated cases. "Would you like a rosemary roll, fresh-baked?" The words carried a practiced politeness, but her eyes kept darting to the milk. Margaret's socialite instincts read it instantly. The child was selling, yet wishing for something else entirely. "How much for one?" Margaret asked, crouching to meet her height. Up close, she noticed a tiny burn mark on the girl's forearm, the kitchen's unwritten autograph. $2, but today they're $1. Flour cost more this week," the girl added, cheeks flushing with professional seriousness. Margaret retrieved a crisp $5 bill. "I'll take 2 rolls and you keep the change." The girl's fingers trembled accepting it. She placed 2 warm parcels into Margaret's palm. Steam carried rosemary's earthy perfume upward, but something far warmer unfolded when the child whispered, "Thank you, now I can buy the milk." Margaret's hand stilled. "The milk for Grandma Rose," the girl said, lowering her voice as if sharing a forbidden secret. "She needs it to mix with her heart medicine, makes it easier to swallow." A bell chimed at the store entrance, startling them both. Shoppers bustled around, oblivious to the fragile moment forming between winter blue eyes and floor-dusted cheeks. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Ellie Harper. I'm 9 3/4. She straightened, pride outweighing fear. "We bake at home and sell here 'cause Grandma can't stand long." Margaret glanced at her cart, then back to Ellie. The 2 gallons suddenly felt heavier, weighted by possibility. "Ellie," she said softly, "how about this? You keep your $5, and I'll buy the milk for Grandma Rose. Deal?" Ellie's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Instead, she nodded quick, grateful, astonished, and in that small, reverent silence, Margaret felt the universe tilt, nudging her toward a road she hadn't planned to walk. 15 minutes later, Margaret wheeled her cart through checkout with Ellie at her side and 2 fresh gallons cradled in the girl's arms like porcelain treasure. Outside, September air smelled of rain-soaked pavement and cinnamon from the coffee kiosk. "Grandma's apartment is closed," Ellie said, leading Margaret toward a side street lined with brick walk-ups. Each step left a ghostly sprinkle of flour on the sidewalk. Ellie's apron pocket still carried remnants of dough. Margaret followed the white flecks as if breadcrumbs guiding her into a fairy tale. They passed shuttered storefronts and a mural of butterflies fading under city grime. Ellie's sneakers slapped puddles, but her words fluttered with excitement. "Grandma says someday we'll open a real bakery." One with stained glass windows and free cookies for anyone sad. And what will you call it? Margaret asked, umbrella unopened despite a mist beginning to fall. Harper rose, because she's the brains and I'm the sprinkles. Ellie giggled, then stopped before a narrow brick building whose trim once gleamed white but now flaked like old pie crust. Unit 2, second floor, smelled of yeast and lavender soap. Inside, the living room moonlighted as a kitchen hot plate, dented stand mixer, racks of cooling bread. A single bulb flickered overhead. Grandma Rose sat in a rocking chair, gray bun pinned neatly, eyes closing each time pain rippled through her chest. She opened them when Ellie entered, relief washing her features. Sold out already? Almost, Grandma. And look, Ellie lifted the milk proudly. Rose's gratitude shone, but confusion followed when she noticed Margaret's elegant presence. Ma'am, can I help you? I'm Margaret Whitmore, she replied, offering a gentle smile. Your granddaughter's baking convinced me to follow the flower trail home. I hope that's all right. Rose's gaze softened. Any friend of Ellie's is welcome, Bow. Fair warning. Our hospitality is mostly crusts and stories. Margaret's heart warmed. Crusts and stories might be exactly what I need. The kitchen occupied barely 6 feet of the apartment, yet it pulsed with life. Shelves bowed beneath mason jars of sawdust starter, vanilla sugar, and faded recipe cards written in looping cursive. Steam coasted from a kettle on the single hot plate, fogging the lone window that overlooked a fire escape sprouting renegade basil in tin cans. Margaret set her shopping tote on a rickety table while Ellie fetched cups that didn't match. Grandma learned to bake during the war, the girl explained, rinsing them carefully. Said bread kept hope warm. Rose chuckled, the sound thin but determined. Flour was rationed, hope was not. She pressed a hand to her chest, wincing before hiding it with a practiced smile. Please sit, Ellie, the good plates next time. Margaret's eyes traveled the cramped space, cracked linoleum patched with duct tape, an unplugged fridge humming on fumes, and, beside the sink, a pill organizer nearly empty. Yet the air smelled marvelous, cinnamon, clove, citrus peel. It reminded her of Christmas mornings long before securities portfolios replaced sugar cookies. You two create magic here, she said, accepting the floral cup. Have you ever entered a baking contest? Your rosemary rolls could win ribbons. Rose waved the idea away. Contests require fees, dear. We need what we have. Margaret's throat tightened. She was worth billions, yet this woman spun dignity from thin dough. Still, she pressed, skills like yours deserve a wider table. Ellie beamed. I tell her that, she says dreams rise slowly like bread. A sudden coughing fit seized Rose. Ellie rushed to steady her, and Margaret noticed the girl's burn again, reddened, untreated. Instinct overrode etiquette. May I look at that? She asked softly, extending her hand. Ellie nodded, small fingers trembling. Margaret examined the welt, then met Rose's eyes. I know a doctor who could see you both, no charge. Rose hesitated, pride wrestling with concern. Finally, she whispered, if it keeps Ellie safe, I'll swallow my pride like medicine with milk. After tea, Rose excused herself to rest, leaving Margaret and Ellie tidying the tiny kitchen. When Ellie opened the refrigerator to store the new gallon of milk, a hollow clunk echoed. Inside, a single stick of butter lay on the top shelf like a stranded boat. Next to it, half a jar of grape jelly and 2 wrinkled apples fought for territory. The bulb inside flickered weakly, revealing rust on metal racks. Margaret's breath caught. She had seen museum displays with more abundance. Is this all for the week? She asked gently. Ellie's shoulders lifted in a practiced shrug. We stretch things. Sometimes the church pantry helps. Mostly we eat what we don't sell. She tried to shut the door casually, but the empty hush lingered. Margaret knelt, meeting the girl's gaze. Every baker needs ingredients, darling. How do you prepare dough? Flour, yeast, water, patience. Ellie recited as though from scripture. But flour's expensive now, and Grandma can't carry big bags. A plan rose inside Margaret like dough under a warm towel. Tomorrow is Saturday. Ride with me to the wholesale market. We'll stock enough to keep your oven busy. Ellie's eyes widened, 1,000 sparkles of disbelief. Wholesale? That's where real bakeries shop. Exactly, Margaret smiled. Harper Rose qualifies. The front room's clock chimed 6, its tick echoing through thin walls. Outside, rain began tapping the glass, each droplet a metronome urging action. Margaret stood, smoothing her shawl. I'll send a car at 8 sharp. Tell Grandma Rose I insist. Ellie hesitated. Grandma worries about charity. Then call it partnership, Margaret said, pressing a business card into Ellie's floor-dusted palm. Embossed gold letters read Whitmore Foundation. Great things rise when ingredients meet opportunity. As Margaret stepped into the damp evening, she realized the refrigerator's emptiness mirrored a loneliness in her own life, a void she hadn't dared acknowledge. Filling that fridge might, in turn, fill something hollow inside her, too. Night fell hard, dragging a restless storm across the city. Lightning snapped like camera flashes over the brick rooftops, and thunder rattled Margaret's penthouse windows. She tried reading, but each page blurred with worries about the Harper's empty fridge. At 10:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered immediately and heard Ellie's panicked sobs. "Grandma can't breathe. She's on the floor. What do I do?" Margaret's heartbeat pounded louder than the rain. "Stay calm, sweetheart. Dial 911 right now. I'm on my way." She grabbed her trench coat, ignoring the driver's protest as she took the wheel of her own sedan. Hoarfrost rain hammered the windshield, but she sped through blinking intersections, wipers slashing frantic arcs. By the time she reached the building, red and white lights painted the street. Sirens wailed against thunder as paramedics wheeled Rose on a gurney, oxygen masks clouding with each shallow breath. Ellie stood drenched, hugging the wicker bread basket like a life preserver. Margaret rushed to her, umbrella useless in gale winds. "I'm here." She wrapped Ellie in her coat, shielding the child and the storm-soaked rolls alike. A paramedic called. "Family can ride along." Kelly's eyes begged. Margaret nodded. "We're her family," she declared, guiding the girl into the ambulance. Inside, monitors beeped relentless warnings. Rose's eyelids fluttered. She recognized Margaret through the mask, offering a frail thumbs up. Lightning illuminated the interior, making the oxygen tubing glow ghost blue. Ellie cried, "Grandma, hold on. We still have tomorrow's market." Margaret squeezed Rose's hand. "You focus on breathing. I'll handle everything else." As the ambulance roared toward St. Catherine's, Margaret realized her role had shifted from benefactor to something deeper, guardian, perhaps even grandmother. Outside, rain cleansed the city streets. Inside, a silent promise formed if Rose survived this night, no Harper pantry would ever be empty again. St. Catherine smelled of antiseptic and hope. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Margaret and Ellie paced the pale green corridor outside cardiac observation. Rose had been whisked behind double doors, leaving a vacuum of silence that weighed on them both. Ellie clutched Margaret's hand, her knuckles white. "They said arrhythmia," she whispered. "Is that bad?" "It's serious, but fixable," Margaret replied, though her voice quavered. She had buried a husband whose heart surrendered without warning. She would not lose another loved one to the same betrayal. A young resident emerged, mask lowered. "Rose Harper is stable for now. Fluid in the lungs triggered the episode. We'll admit her, adjust medication, run tests." He glanced at Ellie. "She'll need rest and proper nutrition." Nutrition. The empty refrigerator flashed through Margaret's mind like a raid alarm. "Doctor, I'll handle food and follow-up care." She pressed a Whitmore Foundation card into his palm. "Spare no resource." After he left, Ellie sagged onto a plastic chair, tears surfacing at last. "Grandma's all I have," she said between chopped sobs. If she goes, the rolls go too." Margaret knelt, leveling her gaze with the girls. "Listen to me. Eleanor Harper, your grandma is strong and she has a new partner now. Tomorrow, we'll stock that kitchen, fix that burn, and hire help so Rose can focus on healing." "But money!" "My dear, I own more flour than most countries." Margaret smiled softly. "What I lack is family. Let me borrow yours, and I'll make sure Grandma gets her bakery doors." Ellie studied her, disbelief slowly dissolving into fragile trust. "Promise?" "On every loaf we'll ever bake." Margaret sealed it with a pinky swear, an oath stronger than any contract she'd signed. At 3:12 a.m., they finally tiptoed into Rose's room. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, yet her eyes twinkled when she saw them. Margaret placed the hospital's miniature carton of milk on the bedside tray. "For the medicine," she said. Rose's smile answered what words could not. "Partnership accepted." 2 weeks later, autumn risked the air with cinnamon promises. Rose was recuperating at home. Medications lined like soldiers on her nightstand. Margaret's Hoffer-driven van pulled to the curb outside their building, its cargo hold bursting with commercial mixers, flour sacks, and a gleaming glass display case. Ellie bounded down the stoop, apron flapping. "Is that really for us?" "Phase 1, Margaret answered, handing her a heavy bronze key on a red ribbon. "Phase 2 waits around the corner." They walked 3 blocks to a vacant storefront whose windows were papered over. Margaret peeled back a corner, revealing sunlit hardwood floors and the faint outline of a hand-painted sign. Sweet City Bakery closed. The owner retired last month, she explained. Now it's Harper Rose. Ellie gasped so deeply she almost toppled. Our own place? With a real oven? A convection oven big enough for 60 loaves a cycle, Margaret confirmed. And stained glass windows arrive next week. Rose, cane in hand, reached them then, her steps slow but steady. Tears glimmered as she touched the door frame. You did all this? We did, Margaret corrected. Investors don't need dough, bakers do. I'm simply the silent partner, though I talk a lot. Inside, dust motes danced like tiny ballerinas. Ellie twirled among them, already imagining display trays piled high. Rose traced the countertop's edge. It needs love, she murmured. Love and lavender soap, Margaret joked, both in ample supply. A contractor stepped forward with blueprints. Shelving here, seating nook there, he said, but paused when Rose laid a gentle hand on his arm. Please keep one thing, she requested, pointing to a cracked, heart-shaped tile near the entrance. Sentimental? Margaret asked. Symbolic, Rose replied. Imperfection welcomes everyone. Margaret looked at the heart-shaped chip, the only flaw in an otherwise perfect floor, and smiled. Imperfection had indeed led her here, a billionaire widow, a recovering grandmother, and a floor-dusted dreamer about to open a corner bakery that might just heal them all. Grand opening day arrived, dusted in powdered sugar and October sun. A fresh sign above the door read Harper Rose Whitmore Bakery. The ampersand twisted into a tiny heart. Neighbors queued down the block, lured by the scent of orange cardamom buns drifting into the brisk air. Inside, Margaret adjusted Ellie's new baker's cap while Rose arranged lavender sprigs in messenger vases. Beside the register sat a velvet box holding 2 fountain pens and a packet of legal papers, the day's secret centerpiece. At noon the line spilled through the door. Margaret tapped a spoon against a mixing bowl. Before the first loaf is sold, we have a small ceremony. Murmurs quieted. She guided Ellie onto a wooden milk crate so everyone could see. Family isn't always blood, Margaret began, voice trembling. Sometimes it's bread, milk and midnight promises. She handed the child one pen, keeping the other. Ellie Harper, today you help me sign adoption papers, if you'll have me. I'd like to be your legal grandmother. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Rose pressed both hands to her mouth as tears slipped past her lashes. Ellie's eyes went wide as sunrise. Grandma Meg, she whispered, trying the name like frosting on her tongue. With all my heart, Margaret replied. Ellie scribbled her looping signature, dotted the I with a crumb of dough by accident. And everyone laughed through misty eyes. Rose added her shaky flourish, sealing the guardianship. The notary stamped in bakery pink ink, and applause thundered louder than any mixer. But Margaret wasn't finished. She lifted a lace handkerchief. And Miss Rose Harper, would you allow me to call you mother? Not by law but by love. Rose chuckled through tears. Child, you had me at cinnamon. 3 generations embraced beneath stained glass windows aglow with autumn light, while customers wiped away tears and reached for warm rolls. The bakery doors opened officially, yet it felt less like commerce and more like a wedding. Promises exchanged, hearts joined, and a community invited to feast on forever. 1 year later, dawn's first glow poured through the bakery's stained glass sunflowers, scattering amber and emerald shards across cooling racks piled high with honey oat loaves. The tiny heart-shaped tile at the entrance, now polished smooth by thousands of footsteps, caught the light like a welcome beacon. Ellie, 10 3/4, slid a tray of raspberry scones into the oven with practiced grace. A faint scar on her forearm had faded to a pale cribon, proof of old trials, not present worries. She inhaled the aroma, then hurried to the front window where a gleaming milk truck parked at the curb. Morning, Miss Ellie, the driver called, handing her 2 crates of glass bottles. Since the bakery's success, the local dairy delivered daily, each bottle stamped with a lavender heart in the Harper's honor. Margaret, no affectionately Grandma Meg to half the neighborhood, arrived from the back office. Shawl replaced by an apron that read Chief Taste Tester, she watched Ellie check inventory against a clipboard, pride softening her stately posture. Remember when a gallon of milk felt impossible, she asked. Ellie nodded, eyes shining. Now we give free milk with every children's breakfast box. She pointed to the corner where a hot board listed the week's donations: school lunch fund, shelter cookie drive, heart medicine grant. Footsteps sounded on the stairs from the apartment above. Rose descended slowly but steadily, carrying a vase of fresh lavender. Her cheeks held healthy color, and the kerchief my flutter in her chest had calmed under proper care. and abundant joy. They gathered by the front counter as sunlight crowned them in gold. Margaret poured 3 small glasses of milk, sliding one to Rose and one to Ellie. To full fridges she toasted. To found families, Rose added. Ellie raised her glass high. And to every person who thinks a small request won't be heard. They drank together, the cool sweetness sealing the circle begun long ago in a grocery aisle. Outside, the neon open sign flickered on, and patrons queued for their morning comfort. Inside, love rose like dough, warm and unstoppable in the morning light.